I never thought the people who raised me would betray me so completely. For years, I had been the one taking care of my aging parents, paying their bills, buying their groceries, driving them to appointments. I thought my dedication meant something. Then I found that document while organizing their paperwork. My hands shook as I read it. Their will. Everything to my brother. My name was not even mentioned once. Not a single word about me. I carefully put it back, a plan already forming in my mind. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you will want to hear how I taught my parents that actions have consequences when they decided I was not worth mentioning in their will. Growing up in Mapleton, a small town in Nebraska, my childhood was what most would consider normal. Our family of 4 lived in a modest 3-bedroom house with a backyard big enough for weekend barbecues and a tire swing my dad hung from the old oak tree. My parents, Frank and Diane, worked steady jobs, my father as a manager at the local hardware store and my mother as a school secretary. We never had luxury vacations or expensive toys, but there was always food on the table and warmth in our home. As kids, my brother Jason and I shared a bedroom until I turned 13. He was 3 years older, and naturally took the role of leader in our childhood adventures. We built forts in the woods behind our house, rode our bikes to the convenience store for slushies during summer breaks, and fought over the Nintendo controller like typical brothers. Mom always made Sunday dinners special with pot roast and her famous apple pie, while Dad taught us practical skills like changing car oil and fixing leaky faucets. After high school, Jason got accepted to a prestigious university in California on a partial scholarship. My parents beamed with pride as they helped him pack his belongings into their station wagon for the cross-country drive. I still remember standing in our driveway, waving goodbye as they departed, leaving me alone for the 2-week road trip they turned into a vacation. That was the beginning of our family dynamic shifting. While Jason pursued his computer science degree in sunny California, I stayed local and attended community college. It was not that I lacked ambition, but someone needed to be nearby as our parents entered their 60s and started experiencing health issues. My father developed arthritis that made his hardware store job increasingly difficult, and my mother began having problems with her vision that eventually required surgery. I graduated with a business degree and found work at a local insurance company. The job paid reasonably well, but the real advantage was the flexible hours that allowed me to help my parents whenever they needed me. By the time I turned 26, I had settled into a routine. Monday evenings were for grocery shopping with my mother. Thursdays I mowed their lawn and handled home maintenance, and at least once a month I drove them to various medical appointments. When Dad finally retired at 67, their fixed income became a challenge. Without discussing it formally, I gradually took on more financial responsibilities. First, it was just helping with their cell phone bill when Dad complained about the rising costs. Then I added their internet service to my account when Mom wanted to video chat with Jason in California. Eventually, I was covering their utilities, supplementing their grocery budget, and paying for home repairs they could no longer afford. All the while, Jason thrived in Silicon Valley. He landed a job at a major tech company right after graduation and quickly climbed the corporate ladder. Twice a year, he would fly home for brief visits, bringing expensive gifts and stories about his glamorous life. My parents listened with rapt attention to his tales of celebrity sightings and business trips to Tokyo and London. What bothered me was not his success. I was genuinely happy that my brother was doing well. What stung was how my parents treated his occasional visits like royal events, while treating my daily support as expected and unremarkable. When Jason fixed their computer during his Christmas visit, they raved about it for weeks. When I fixed their leaking roof in the pouring rain on a Tuesday night after work, it was met with a simple thank you, if that. Still, I never complained. These were my parents, and I loved them. I told myself that someday they would recognize the sacrifice and dedication I had shown by staying close and supporting them through their retirement years. I believed that actions spoke louder than words, and surely my consistent presence in their lives meant more than Jason sending expensive birthday gifts from 2,000 miles away. It was during tax season last April when everything changed. Mom had asked me to help organize their paperwork for their accountant. Their filing system had become chaotic since Dad's eyesight started failing, and they needed someone to sort through years of accumulated documents. I sat at their dining room table surrounded by folders and loose papers, creating neat piles for medical expenses, property tax statements, and charitable donations. That was when I noticed a folder labeled Personal Documents tucked between insurance policies, thinking it might contain birth certificates or social security cards they would need. I opened it. Inside was a document dated just 6 months earlier. The heading read Last Will and Testament of Frank and Diane Winters. My heart warmed momentarily, thinking about how responsible they were being by getting their affairs in order. I thought I might even find a note about specific keepsakes they wanted me to have. As I scanned the document, however, that warm feeling evaporated. The will was simple and straightforward. Upon their death, all assets, including their house savings and personal possessions, would transfer to their son, Jason Winters. The document mentioned his name multiple times, specifying items of value and accounts he would inherit. I read it again, certain I had missed something. There was no mention of their other son, me, Axel Winters. I did not exist on these pages. That night I barely slept. The ceiling fan in my apartment spun in lazy circles as I replayed every family gathering, every sacrifice, every time I had rearranged my life to accommodate my parents' needs. Had it all meant nothing? The thousands of dollars I had spent on their utilities, groceries, and home repairs over the years could have gone toward my own mortgage instead of rent. The vacation days I had used for their doctor appointments could have been actual vacations. The evenings and weekends spent at their house could have been invested in building my own social life, maybe even finding someone to start a family with. By morning, my shock had hardened into something more painful, a deep ache that settled in my chest and would not leave. I went through the motions that day at work, my mind constantly returning to that document. Maybe there was some explanation. Maybe they had another will that included me. Maybe this was just a draft, not the final version. But as the days passed and I continued my usual routine of calling and visiting them, I started noticing things I had been blind to before. How my mother always mentioned Jason within the first 5 minutes of any conversation. How the photos on their mantle were predominantly of him, his graduation, his company awards ceremony, the luxury condo he had purchased last year. The few photos of me were older, mostly from high school, as if my adult accomplishments were not worth documenting. When my father called asking if I could help pay for a new water heater after theirs broke, I agreed automatically. But as I wrote the check, resentment bubbled up inside me. I would pay for a new appliance in a house that would never be mine, that would someday belong to my brother, who contributed nothing to its upkeep. 2 weeks after discovering the will, I decided to test the waters during Sunday dinner at their house. As we ate the lasagna I had brought, I casually mentioned a podcast I had listened to about estate planning. "Did you two ever think about getting a will written up?" I asked, keeping my voice light and curious. "Your father and I have all that taken care of," Mom replied quickly, her eyes not meeting mine. "Nothing for you to worry about." I pressed a little further. "I just think it is important to have those conversations as a family. Make sure everyone understands your wishes." Dad put down his fork with a clatter. "We do not need to discuss this at dinner, Axel. Everything is handled appropriately." I noticed how he emphasized appropriately, as if daring me to question their judgment. Still, I tried once more. "I just want to make sure you have considered everything. I mean, I have been helping out a lot around here and with your finances." Mom jumped in then, her voice unnaturally high. "Jason will make sure everything is fair when the time comes. He promised to look after things. He has always been so responsible with money." And there it was. The unspoken truth laid bare at their dinner table. Jason, who lived across the country, who called once a month at most, who had not contributed a dime to their care, was the responsible one. I, who had sacrificed my own financial future for theirs, was not even worth mentioning in their will. I changed the subject, but something fundamental had shifted. That night driving home, I realized they knew exactly what they had done. This was not an oversight or a first draft. They had deliberately chosen to leave me nothing, not even a token acknowledgement of my existence. The following weeks were difficult. Each time I paid their electric bill or picked up their prescriptions, I felt like a fool. Each time they called asking for help with something around the house, the resentment grew stronger. Yet I continued the routine, partly out of habit, and partly because I needed time to process what this meant for our relationship. The The breaking point came during the 4th of July weekend. Jason flew in for the holiday, and our parents hosted a backyard barbecue with extended family. I arrived early to help set up while Jason showed up an hour late with an expensive bottle of scotch for Dad, which immediately became the center of attention. As evening fell and neighbors began setting off fireworks, I overheard a conversation between Jason and our parents on the patio. I had gone inside to refill the ice bucket when their voices drifted through the open window. "So I was thinking," Dad said, "when the time comes you might want to keep the house rather than sell it. The market in this neighborhood has been improving. I will figure it out," Jason replied casually. "Maybe I will rent it out for extra income, or use it as a vacation place when I visit the Midwest for work." Mom chimed in. "We just want to make sure you are set up well. You have the twins to think about now." Jason had twin daughters aged 3 whom he brought to visit once a year. I had no children, yet a fact my mother frequently lamented. "Do not worry about me," Jason laughed. "I will take care of everything, including you two old folks, when you need it." Take care of them. Was he serious? Who did he think had been taking care of them for the past 8 years? Who drove them to every doctor appointment, fixed everything that broke in their house, made sure their bills were paid on time? Something snapped inside me at that moment. The ice bucket still in my hands, I made a decision. I would not confront them, would not create a scene at their perfect family barbecue. Instead, I would show them exactly what my absence from their lives would mean. I returned to the backyard, placed the ice bucket on the table, and made an excuse about not feeling well. I left while fireworks exploded overhead, multicolored bursts, illuminating my drive home. By the time I reached my apartment, my plan was fully formed in my mind. The next morning, I opened my laptop and began systematically removing my financial support from my parents' lives. First, I canceled the automatic payments I had set up for their electric, water, and gas bills. Then, I removed their cell phones from my family plan. I called the grocery delivery service I had arranged for them and canceled the weekly order. Each click felt simultaneously terrible and liberating. I was not being vindictive, I told myself. I was simply aligning my actions with their stated wishes. If I meant so little to them that I did not deserve even a mention in their will, then surely they did not expect me to continue supporting them financially. Still, guilt nagged at me. Would they be able to manage without my help? Their Social Security and pension covered their basic needs, but with little room for extras or emergencies. They had become accustomed to the standard of living my contributions provided. But then I remembered the will and the overheard conversation, and my resolve strengthened. They had made their choice. Now I was making mine. The first sign that they had noticed came 3 days later. A text from Mom. "The grocery delivery did not come today. Is there a problem with the service?" I did not respond immediately, unsure what to say. Eventually I wrote back, "I canceled it. You might want to set up your own account." Her reply was quick. "Why would you do that without telling us? We were counting on those groceries." Again, I waited before responding. I thought it was time for me to stop paying for it. "You and Dad can set it up yourselves if you want to continue." There was no response after that, but the following day Dad called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was brief and irritated, asking me to call them back as soon as possible. I did not. A week after I had canceled everything, the messages became more frequent and urgent. Mom texted that they had received notices about unpaid utility bills. Dad called twice, asking if I could come over to look at a plumbing issue. I maintained my distance, responding only with brief texts explaining that I was busy. What I had not expected was how difficult this would be emotionally. Despite everything, these were still my parents. I had to fight the instinct to rush over and fix whatever was wrong to make sure they were okay. But each time that impulse rose, I reminded myself of the will and steeled my resolve. This was a necessary lesson for them and for me. 17 days after I began my withdrawal, the text arrived that would become the turning point. It was from Dad. No greeting, just, "The power just got shut off." The lack of hello or explanation said everything about how they viewed our relationship. I was not a son to be respected or even greeted properly. I was a utility expected to function without acknowledgement or gratitude. My response was equally brief. "Not my house." Those 3 words unleashed a storm. Within minutes, my phone exploded with calls and texts. Dad called 4 times in succession. Mom sent a series of increasingly panicked messages about food spoiling in the refrigerator. Then came the text from Jason, clearly having been filled in on the situation. "What the hell are you doing? Mom and Dad need help. Stop being childish and fix this." I turned off my phone for the rest of the day, giving myself space from their reactions. When I turned it back on the next morning, there were 17 missed calls and over 30 text messages. Most were variations on the same themes, shock that I would leave them without electricity and orders to fix the situation immediately. What was notably absent from any of these communications was a question about why I had done this. Not once did either parent ask if something was wrong or if they had done something to upset me. They simply demanded I resume my role as their support system without question. 3 days after the power was shut off, there was a pounding on my apartment door. I knew before opening it who would be there. Both my parents stood in the hallway, my father red-faced with anger, my mother looking tearful and bewildered. "What is wrong with you?" Dad demanded, as soon as I opened the door. "We have been without power for days. The food in our refrigerator is ruined." I stepped aside silently, letting them enter. For a moment we all stood in my small living room, the tension thick enough to touch. "Are you going to explain yourself?" Mom asked, her voice quavering. "How could you just abandon us like this?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment I had been preparing for. "I want to know why I am not in your will," I said calmly. The effect was immediate. Both of them froze, exchanging a quick, guilty glance. "You went through our personal papers," Dad blustered, attempting to shift the focus. "I was organizing your tax documents like you asked me to." "I found it by accident," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Everything goes to Jason. I do not even get a mention. Not even $1. Nothing." Mom sank onto my couch, suddenly looking very old. "We were going to talk to you about that," she said weakly, when I asked. "It is dated from 6 months ago." My father paced the small space of my living room. "Look, Jason has the twins to think about," he said defensively. "And his job might not be as secure as it seems with all those tech layoffs happening. We just thought he might need it more." "And what about me?" I countered. "Who has been paying your bills for the last 5 years? Who drives you to every doctor appointment? Who fixes everything in your house?" "That is different," Dad said dismissively. "You are here. It is easy for you to help out." "And that is exactly why I stopped," I replied. "Because you take it for granted. You expect me to give and give, but when it comes time to acknowledge what I have done, I do not even get a mention in your will." "So, this is blackmail?" Dad asked incredulously. "You will only help us if we put you in the will." I shook my head. "This is not blackmail. This is me refusing to be taken advantage of anymore. I have spent thousands of dollars supporting you both, and countless hours of my time. I did it because I love you, and thought you valued what I do for you. Finding out that you do not even consider me worth mentioning in your will showed me how you really feel." Mom was crying now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "We do appreciate you, Axel," she insisted. "We just did not think about it that way." "Well, I need you to think about it now," I said firmly. "I am not asking for special treatment. I am asking for acknowledgement of my role in your lives. And until that happens, I am stepping back. You will need to manage your bills and your house on your own, or ask Jason to help from California." "This is ridiculous," Dad sputtered. "You would leave your elderly parents without electricity over money." "This is not about money," I replied. "This is about respect. And for the record, you are not without options. You can pay your own bills with your pension and Social Security. You can ask your golden child for help. You can downsize to a more affordable living situation. What you cannot do is continue to exploit my good nature while planning to leave me nothing." The argument continued for another hour, cycling through guilt trips, accusations, and finally reluctant acknowledgement that perhaps they had been taking advantage of my proximity and willingness to help. They left without a resolution, my father still angry, my mother subdued and tearful. That night, Jason called, his voice tight with controlled fury. What kind of son holds his parents financially hostage? The kind whose parents do not even consider him worth mentioning in their will, I replied evenly. Have they asked you to start paying their bills yet? Or are you too busy with your important job to be bothered? His momentary silence told me they had indeed asked. Look, the will thing was their decision, not mine, he finally said, his tone defensive. I did not ask them to leave everything to me. But you knew about it, I guessed. And you did not think there was anything wrong with that arrangement. Another telling pause. I just assumed they had discussed it with you, he muttered. It is not my place to tell them what to do with their property. No, but it is your place to recognize when something is deeply unfair, I countered. You have contributed nothing to their care for the past 8 years, while I have given up career opportunities, relationships, and thousands of dollars to support them. And your response to finally being asked to help is to call me and complain. The conversation ended with an uncomfortable truce. Jason agreed to think about the situation from my perspective, and I agreed not to mention to our parents that he had called me instead of immediately offering to help them financially. 2 weeks passed. I heard through my aunt that my parents had borrowed money from her to get their electricity turned back on. Jason had apparently sent some cash as well, though not as much as they had hoped. My father was still furious with me, but my mother had begun sending tentative text messages asking how I was doing and if we could talk soon. When I finally agreed to meet them for coffee at a neutral location, a local diner we had frequented when I was growing up, I arrived to find not just my parents but also Jason. He had flown in specifically for this meeting, a fact that impressed me more than I wanted to admit. We ordered coffee and sat in awkward silence for a few moments before my mother spoke. We have been doing a lot of thinking, she began hesitantly, about everything you said. My father looked uncomfortable but nodded in agreement. We did not realize how much we had come to depend on you, or how unfair that was, he admitted grudgingly. Jason cleared his throat. And I did not realize how much I had been letting you handle on your own, he added. That was not right. I listened silently, waiting to hear what came next. Pretty words were easy, but I needed to see real change. We talked to our lawyer, Mom continued. We have rewritten the will. The house and all assets will be divided equally between you and Jason, and I am going to start contributing regularly to their expenses, Jason added. We have set up a joint account where I will deposit money monthly for utilities and groceries. It was more than I had expected, an acknowledgement not just of the financial imbalance, but of the emotional one as well. Still, I was cautious. I appreciate that I said carefully. But this is not just about the will or the money. It is about how you value my contribution to this family. It is about respect. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I know I have not been good at showing it, he said gruffly. But I am proud of the man you have become, Axel. The way you stepped up to help us, that shows character. I should have told you that more often. Coming from my stoic father, this was equivalent to a lengthy emotional speech. I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen slightly. We have taken advantage of your good nature, Mom added, reaching across the table to touch my hand. We got so used to you being there for us that we stopped seeing how much you were giving. I am so sorry for that. Over the next hour, we negotiated a new family dynamic. I would resume helping them, but with clear boundaries. Jason would contribute financially each month. Major expenses would be discussed as a family before decisions were made. And most importantly, they would make an effort to acknowledge and appreciate what each of us brought to the family, rather than taking either of us for granted. The transition was not smooth. Dad occasionally slipped back into his expectant attitude, assuming I would drop everything to help with household issues. Mom still mentioned Jason's accomplishments more frequently than mine. Old patterns are hard to break. But when these slips occurred, I now felt empowered to point them out gently but firmly. Jason and I established a new kind of relationship as well. We started having regular video calls to coordinate our support of our parents, which gradually evolved into genuine conversations about our lives. I came to appreciate his willingness to acknowledge the imbalance and work to correct it, and he seemed to gain new respect for the daily support I had been providing all these years. As for me, the experience transformed how I approached all my relationships. I learned to value myself enough to establish healthy boundaries. I realized that true generosity comes from choice, not obligation or expectation. Most importantly, I understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and others is to stand firm and demand the respect you deserve. A year has passed since that fateful discovery, and our family has found a new equilibrium. I still help my parents regularly, but now it is acknowledged and appreciated rather than expected. The revised will sit in their filing cabinet, a tangible symbol of our new, more balanced family dynamic. The most valuable lesson I learned was not about inheritance or money, but about self-worth. Sometimes we teach people how to treat us by what we allow, what we accept, without question. By finally standing up for myself, I not only changed how my family saw me, but how I saw myself. Have you ever had to take a difficult stand with family members who took you for granted? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And if you know someone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics, share this video with them. It might help them find the courage to establish their own boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that demanding respect is not selfish. It is essential for healthy relationships. Until next time.